Hey, it's Kasim with Solutions 8, and today's video I want to talk about the single greatest advertising mechanism that Google has given e-commerce merchants in the history of advertising. And I'm not being hyperbolic, and I'm going to prove it to you with case studies. You ready? We are talking about smart shopping, wicked smart shopping. So here's case study number one. 1,150% ROAS. So that's return on ad spend, if you don't already know. And what's interesting about this particular campaign is we have a perfect apples to apples comparison before smart shopping, after smart shopping. And you can see that highlighted here. This particular client spent $17,585 to make $202,000. Imagine that being your everyday. And this is over the course of 4 months, incidentally. So that close to 1,200% ROAS is consistent month over month. You can see the snapshot here is a comparison of the previous 4 months to March through the end of June. So really solid data just in terms of what happens before smart shopping, what happens after smart shopping. I want to just take a minute here to focus too on the fact that they got 500,000 impressions. I know that impressions is a vanity metric. I understand that. So it's not anything that you want to bank everything off of. But it's important to understand when you're using smart shopping that your brand awareness goes through the roof. And I'm going to show you that using case study data as well. So smart shopping is pushing your messaging, your website, your URL, your product names, your imagery, etc., across every advertising mechanism inside of the Google ecosystem. And in so doing, it's raising the amount of brand awareness that you're currently getting. So you're going to see a ton of branded search. As a matter of fact, this particular client saw their brand campaign increase by $11,500. So what's nice about smart shopping is it's very synergistic in terms of the way that it works with your overarching marketing plans, including your branded campaigns. So these folks spent $2,100 to make $72,000, which is a pretty good day. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, all right, anybody can have one good campaign. This is just a flash in the pan. If you didn't laugh at that, you're dead inside. So let me give you a couple more case studies. Here's this is an online shoe retailer. They have 687% ROAS in smart shopping alone. Now, again, remember what I said about branded. Look at how good their branded campaign is functioning. They have a 2,100% ROAS in branded. Now, your branded campaign should always be functioning really well, but what we see when you start running smart shopping is their branded search start to increase incrementally month over month until your branded campaign really starts to boost. So I like to couple the ROAS with branded alongside smart shopping so you can see the impact. We call that a conversion lift. So these folks spent $7,000, $7,700 to make $53,000. And that's a good day. And obviously that wasn't in a day. I think that was a 2-month period. But here's a company, they do personal care. It's a consumable. What's nice about this client is this ROAS is not an indication of lifetime value. This is just the first purchase, and this is something that people purchase over and over and over and over again. They've got a phenomenal retention. They have a 1,500% ROAS in smart shopping. They have a 3,700% ROAS if we include their branded. They spent $10,000 and they made $150,000. Here's a food processing equipment company, 1,500% ROAS in smart shopping. 3,100% in their total campaign. Oops, wrong way. This is a small e-com site. He sells wallets, bags, belts, accessories. They're handmade with special materials. It's kind of cool. Niche, though, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because for all you niche retailers out there, this is a perfect example of a high-performing smart shopping campaign. 625% ROAS. And again, look at these timetables. Like the ranges that I'm showing you, these are over extended periods of time. So you can run we can go get a Facebook campaign that gets you a 1,500% ROAS, but it's going to burn itself out in 2 weeks. You're not burning lists here. The nice thing about smart shopping is, it's more or less evergreen. Obviously with adjustments for cyclical markets. So you're going to get more, if you're an accessories company, you're going to get more purchases over, the holiday season than you will normally. But in as much as purchase is consistent, so too is your traffic. I could have said that better. I'll work on it. Here's a company that sells luggage. He has a 2,800% ROAS. Now, this is a really interesting client. He refuses to let us run branded. Refuses. He's like, I'm not paying for clicks that I'd have got normally. And so a couple notes on that. Number one, there's no guarantee that you're going to get that click, because when you're running traffic and if you're spending enough, people are going to bid on your brand. So you need to protect your brand. Number two, even if you do get that click, you're going to be able to see more data and track your conversion path to a greater degree if you're paying for the click than if you rely on it organically. And those clicks are cheap because it's your brand and you're already so relevant for it. So if you run a branded campaign, it really gives you the opportunity to begin identifying that approach that people take in a silo. And I'll share with you why that's so important in this next case study. So here's a company that does specialty clothing. They sell a special type of hat. Again, ultra niche. You'll notice their ROAS is low at 227%. And that's not abysmal. There's some companies that can make that work, but it's not as good as some of the other ones that I was showing you. However, their all campaign ROAS is 462%. And you'll notice that they have this massive uptick here in this return search. So here's a 3,200% ROAS in return search. And if we look at their top conversion paths, so, if you're not familiar with this report, you can run a top conversion paths report. And what this will show you is, here's one person who purchased. Or it's actually potentially more. It'll show you the quantity, but I've this screenshotted here so that I could zoom in. Here's a purchase path, and somebody clicked on a Smart Shopping ad, came back in through branded, and then ended up purchasing on a Smart Shopping ad. You'll notice most of these start with Smart Shopping and end with return search. So what's happening here is this is last click attribution, which means return search is getting the credit for the purchase. But as you can see with their conversion path, Smart Shopping bought us that customer. So Smart Shopping is really responsible for this 3,200% ROAS. And we're investing in buying these customers here and pushing them there. So Smart Shopping, in my mind, gets the full credit. And I think that that's data-driven. Here's a consumable product. They sell I can't tell you what they sell because it'll give them away right away. But they've got a great ROAS and a really long-term campaign. 576% ROAS, 665% overarching. Their branded campaign's a little tough because their brand name is so generic. Here's a sporting equipment store, online retailer, not store. 722% ROAS. They're relatively new with us too, which is great. And then 839% ROAS all campaigns. Imagine spending $10,000 in order to make $80,000. That's what we're doing over and over and over again. I'm not done. Here's specialty jackets. 1,600% ROAS across all campaigns. Here's a client that we just started with. So today, as I'm shooting this video, is August 5th. We started with this gentleman July 20th. So it's a little more than 2 weeks. And in a little more than 2 weeks, we've gotten 335% ROAS. He needs a 300% in order to be profitable. So we're already winning. And we tell clients it takes 45 days to make this work. So now, again, not every campaign is going to function this way. But I just want you to see, how often this works and for how, the breadth of organization. He has a 1,200% ROAS across all campaigns. And again, his branded saw a nice big uptick the minute we started advertising this way. So what is Smart Shopping? First, let's cover Google's lies, because Google's going to lie to us, and then we'll figure out what the truth is. Google, I'm not going to read it to you, but I've got excerpts of what Google says Smart Shopping is from this support document. And what I think is most interesting is they try to position Smart Shopping as a remarketing strategy, let's say. Couldn't think of the word there. What I think is so funny is, oops, didn't mean to do that. Going the wrong way. Bam. What I think is so funny is the fact that Google's not giving, if you go to this doc here, and I'll make sure the link is included in the description of this video, there's a small note about something called dynamic prospecting. No hyperlink. No additional documentation. If you search Google's help docs for dynamic prospecting, you find 0 articles dedicated to it. You find a small 2 paragraphs at the bottom of the help documentation about remarketing. And these are the 2 paragraphs. This I will read to you. Dynamic prospecting brings user information and product information together to show your best products at the right time to the users who would be the most interested. Dynamic prospecting uses machine learning to get an idea for what potential buyers are looking for and combines that possible intent with demographic-based information to match users with product in your feed. What they're doing is they're identifying who's already buying from your site, and then they're going out and they're finding more people like that. It's not an inbound. We're so used to treating Google as an inbound mechanism. It's not search. They're like, all right, Tom, Dick, and Harry all bought this hat. And I know that Sally, Michael, and George, demographically and psychographically, based on the fact that I have 70 million profiling factors, I know that they kind of look like Tom, Dick, and Harry. So I'm going to go push this advertisement to them in, the display network, YouTube, Gmail sponsored promotions across the entire Google ecosystem. And what's insane, what's actually kind of terrifying, is it works. Google knows what you're going to buy before you've articulated intent. And I think the reason, and the reason I'm bringing up the fact that they're not being very forthcoming with this narrative, is if we really wrapped our head around that, it would terrify everybody. There would be a congressional hearing and an antitrust suit, and we'd be breaking them up, because they've got a finger to the pulse. They know what you're going to buy before you do. And it's scary how effective that's been. So smart shopping is tracking users' existing purchases. It's identifying common denominators. And then what's really more interesting and possibly even scarier for us retailers, if you've got, if you're running retail campaigns, is it's also measuring not just users and what they want to buy, but the performance of your products with those users. So Google's going to be in a really strong position to commoditize every market, because it's going to have all the data on what products work and what products don't. Remember, I've used this a lot. So if you've been watching any of my videos, you've seen this screen grab before. Google was able to tell a woman that she was pregnant before she knew, using her search data. And that was 5 years ago. It was more than 5 years ago now. And think about the speed at which machine learning has moved. So 5 years ago, Google was able to tell a woman was pregnant before she knew. What do they know now? And they're using that in order to push commercial intent. So how do we do it? How do we create these results? Here's what's really interesting is go Google smart shopping for me for just a moment. What you'll find is a bunch of companies, really, all the agencies, a lot of the thought leaders, everybody's bashing smart shopping. It doesn't work. It's dangerous. You lose all control. We tried it and it failed. And that's because they're not doing it right. You have to crack the code. And just like anything that's relatively new, you have to be patient with it. So I'm going to give you our best practices and the approach that we take, pausing for water, with the understanding that we're not right about everything either, but our results should speak for themselves. So here's what Google says to do. They say that you need at least 20 conversions over the last 45 days in a standard shopping campaign, that you have to have the site tag and remarketing list with at least 100 users. If you don't have the site tag, by the way, you can use analytics, but that's not relevant. Either will work. They say not to use smart shopping and standard shopping campaigns together. They say don't run remarketing campaigns along smart shopping. They say use one smart shopping campaign for all your products. That's really important. Give your smart shopping campaign at least 45 days to see proper results. And keep your product feed up to date. That's what Google says. Most of this is a lie, at least half. So this at least 20 conversions, this has not been true at all for any of the smart shopping campaigns that we've run. Now, is it ideal to have conversions in your shopping campaign? Yes, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be in standard shopping. We've seen conversions catalyzed in other campaigns in other sectors, and we've also seen smart shopping launch right away. Not that that's ideal, but this doesn't appear to be true at all. The site tag and remarketing list, I think, is probably a good best practice, even if it's not true. I don't see how this 100 user thing could be true, because we've been able to launch campaigns without that, and smart shopping, because it's proactive in the dynamic prospecting, is creating this list themselves. So I don't think this is true, but it's irrelevant, I guess, for our purposes. You should stay away from using smart shopping and standard shopping at the same time. Just pause your standard shopping campaigns. However, you need to run a remarketing campaign alongside smart shopping. That's the best practice. That's the way we've been able to produce some of the results we've been producing, and I'll explain to you why. What's funny about it is the remarketing campaign that you'll run will get zero traffic, and we'll go over that in just a minute. Google wants you to use one smart shopping campaign for all products. That's a catastrophic error. The last two notes are true, though. These are, it takes 45 days at least to qualify smart shopping. So you need to be in it for at least a month and a half, preferably two, before we even start to be in a position to grade whether or not smart shopping is starting to work. Here's what we've learned. And the obligatory disclaimer here is one that I've already given you, which is, we're breaking rules, and we're doing so knowingly. But in breaking rules, we've been able to find things that work that other people haven't been able to make work. But I think that also means it tells us that Google's kind of, honing things, as it's always doing. So be prepared to be nimble is all I'd say here. This is the paradigm that everybody assumes. You, me, and everybody else sees Google as a dumb dog. And the dumb dog, well, I love dogs, by the way, so I'm not saying dogs are dumb. I'm just saying that you're looking at Google as a dumb dog. And the dumb dog will go get for the most part, what you ask. And so you're playing fetch with Google, and you're like, and we think of Google that way because of the way that Google search works. It's like, Google, I need this, fetch. And then Google brings it back. And you're like, all right, good job, Google. Pat on the head. And as advertisers, we tend to kind of do the same thing. We're like, Google, I want more purchases. Go get me more purchases. And then Google brings it back. Now, you see Google as a dumb dog. Google sees Google as a brilliant dog. Google sort of overstates its value sometimes and thinks it's just the smartest, most brilliant, best trained, can find anything. And I don't know that that's necessarily true either. And it's worth understanding Google's paradigm, because when I go over the rules and the things that Google says that are and are not true, it's not that Google is intentionally lying in many instances. It's that I think it's we're all in our own echo chamber. And, they're in the Google echo chamber. So they're just facets of what they think to be true that I have found, practically speaking, not to be true. I think Google's not necessarily a dumb dog or a smart dog. I think it's a very obedient dog. I think of Google as a sled dog. And the last thing you want to do with a sled dog is throw it on your back as you're running the sled. So this is how I feel most advertisers are using Google. You've got this amazing resource, and instead of using it for what it's meant for, your driving, and it's not your highest and best use, and it's not Google's highest and best use. This is where we want to be. We want to use Google for what it's good for. We want to direct the process where necessary. We want to use all of Google, and not just, cherry pick or get romantic. And here's how we do that. So action item number 1, and the most important thing, I think, not just with Smart Shopping, but with any Google Ads campaign ever, and it shocks me how many people get this wrong, including agencies, is conversion tracking. Talking about our dumb dog, smart dog thing. The dog that is Google isn't going to know that it did anything right unless you tell it through conversion tracking. And where the error exists is if you're not tracking all of your conversions, then you're not giving Google a complete picture of what's going on. If you're not tracking any conversions, you're not giving Google any picture, of course. But that's actually not as bad as tracking faux conversions. So a lot of people, especially in the e-commerce space, are either tracking, they're over-reporting their conversions. They're tracking the wrong thing as conversions. Somebody landing on the checkout page instead of actually checking out. If you tell Google, oh, that was a win, we did it, good job, Google's going to go, great, I'm going to go get you more of those. And so now you're paying money to go get people who didn't buy from you yet. So you have to have conversion tracking installed. It has to be airtight. This is hard, especially in e-commerce. So just know that there's some hoops to jump through, but once you've done this, you're 50% of the grunt work out of the way. So you need to have conversion tracking with conversion value enabled. You have to have the conversion values because Google needs to know how much money you're making on each purchase, because it can prioritize the products that you're selling accordingly. You can't rely solely on analytics conversion data. This is really tempting to do because it's so easy to pipe into Google Ads and just focus on your analytics conversion data. The problem with that is analytics is first click attributed. You're also not getting a full view of everything that's going on, and it doesn't allow you to make the adjustments that we would need to make. Shopify users, be careful. Google has this really cool, I've never seen it from the Shopify standpoint. I've only ever seen it from the agency standpoint, but they have a really cool thing that they allow you to push a Google Ads campaign basically is automatically created from a Shopify account, which is awesome. And it's structured really well. I'd say bravo to Shopify. The problem is Shopify automatically, they add conversion actions for you, and they track all conversion actions as a conversion value. So they'll say, for instance, let's say you have a $10 product. If somebody adds it to a cart, that's a conversion action. If they click the checkout button, that's a conversion action. If they purchase that, that's a conversion action. Well, Shopify is tracking all 3 of those as actually having been a conversion. So your one $10 purchase is now a $30 purchase value in Google's eyes. So you have to go in and make sure that you can still track these conversions, just don't track them as conversion value, which is important to know. And odd that a company like Shopify, given their size, could make a mistake like that. I don't think Shopify would intentionally try to over-report their own data. We use Google's tag implementation team. Now, this is free for everybody, incidentally. So any human on the planet who, I imagine within reason, who wants to use Google's tag implementation team can, and they will help you. You schedule time with them. They put the whole thing together for you inside of Google Tag Manager. They build the trigger and the tag, and then you install the conversion ID and conversion label inside of the trigger and tag. Now, if what I said didn't make sense to you, don't worry. There are enough online tutorials. We can create one too. There are enough online tutorials that show you how to create, how to add a conversion in Google Ads using Google Tag Manager. It's that exact process. Just know that the Google Tag implementation team does the first step, and they're connecting your purchase procedure inside of Google Tag Manager in a way that, to be honest with you, I don't understand. So I would strongly recommend not trying to figure that part out yourself. I'd recommend using Google's Tag Implementation Team. Another really important note is don't make assumptions. There's, the old marketing mantras, or the old sales mantras, you're currently selling, what's currently selling is selling because you're selling it. So, if you take a car lot and you got a car salesman that really loves Volkswagens, you're going to notice that Volkswagens are going to move in a lot faster. And that's because he has a predisposition to Volkswagen, so that's what he's selling. Every client we bring on will always tell us, like, oh, this is going to be our best performing product, or this is what people really want. And 50% of the time, they're very surprised. So don't make assumptions. Google's going to sell what it wants to sell. Don't try to push your agenda. You might say, hey, this is easier to sell. This is easier to fulfill. I really need to move this because we have too many of them. That's a dangerous way to build a marketing campaign. You want to build a marketing campaign around the things that will work, so you have a long-term solution, not just because you have too much of something that was over-ordered. And then include your entire product catalog. Give Google the opportunity to go through the entire breadth of everything that you offer, because that's where smart shopping really works. The more SKUs, the better, because it's more kind of at-bats that you're giving Google. Now, low SKU campaigns have a tough time with smart shopping, but they can still work. We've even made a single SKU campaign work. So don't let that scare you off, but just realize that you're at a mild disadvantage because you're not going to get quite as much play as somebody with a ton of SKUs. And I wouldn't prioritize any of your products to begin with. There's one exception to this, which I'll get to. But what's nice is smart shopping is going to identify what people actually want. So we have a medical device company that I'll use as an example. Long-time client, great people. But what's funny is we started smart shopping in order to sell a certain set of products. They were the higher-end products. Some of them many thousands of dollars for these devices. And we included the remainder of their product catalog just as a best practice, but they really didn't want to sell these things necessarily, or didn't think they would sell. Is maybe better stated. So we ended up on the phone with them, and the owner was actually mad. And she was mad because she was like, I'm spending 2 hours a day shipping out fulfillment orders, which, for her, it was actually a bad problem to have because that was not the best use of her time. But we ended up, walking her through a process that would offload that onto somebody else. And now they have a whole new line of business that they didn't even know could possibly exist, selling the accessories to the medical devices, which were apparently in far higher demand. And that whole new line of business is sizable. It's a nice, massive chunk of new purchase that they weren't getting before. So don't make assumptions. Another thing we learned is you have to invest in your product feed. Google's going to come out and tell you, but they don't push this narrative enough. The way that they're determining what your product is and whether or not they even offer it is robust product information. So really descriptive titles, robust descriptions, relevant product details, great images. I don't have that here, but I should. Solid images. So you have to keep your feed up to date, make sure that what you say is in stock is actually in stock, and then optimize your feed according to what's happening. So you're optimizing your feed reactively. If you have a product that's selling really well, take a look at what's happening there and see if you can't spread that across other products. If you have products that aren't moving, take a look and see if you can't update the feed. We use Data Feed Watch because it's an easier tool to manage feeds with. So I'm not a Data Feed Watch affiliate. There's no sales pitch here. I just like them. I enjoy their tool. But if you're going to run smart shopping campaigns, your product feed needs to be airtight. GTIN. Most retailers probably know what a GTIN is. I didn't, and so we had to go learn this lesson. But Google asks for a GTIN when you're selling products, and it's a unique identifier. Every product has its own GTIN, and it lets Google know, and it's agnostic, incidentally. It's sort of like the world has decided that there's a barcode for this particular product, and if you're selling normal products, you should be able to go get a GTIN for your product. If for whatever reason your product doesn't have a GTIN, we actually saw one of our clients, they had a specialty product, and they broke through a glass ceiling by purchasing a GTIN. They're not expensive. So $250 here for if you're buying 1 through 10, and a $50 annual renewal fee. And this has been really important for smart shopping campaigns. And again, super pro tip here. Most agencies aren't going to figure this out because Google doesn't make that big a deal out of it. Big warning, this flies in the face of what Google recommends. Sorry, pausing for water. Breakup product by ROAS. So Google wants all of your products in one smart shopping campaign. What I'd recommend doing instead is break your products up into 3 campaigns with low margin, medium margin, high margin. Your higher margin products have a lower ROAS requirement. So you can, one, when you're building a smart shopping campaign, Google has you list, it's an option to list a target ROAS. So you can adjust your target ROAS. And then two, you get to assign your budgets according to how it is that you want to distribute your spend across products that have various margins. So if you have enough SKUs to do this, do it. If you don't, just put everything together. And if you don't have much in the way of variance from a margin perspective, ignore what I just said. Google is traffic agnostic when it comes to smart shopping. So smart shopping can capture buying signals from any traffic source. What we found was, we actually found this out on accident. We were running a smart shopping campaign. A client of ours hired a Facebook ad agency. The Facebook ad agency started running traffic. Their Facebook campaign failed, interestingly, but we saw a smart shopping campaign that had plateaued, all of a sudden increase in volume. The ROAS maintained the same. I forget what they were getting, but like 600-700% ROAS. So their ROAS stayed the same, but we could only spend 10 grand and we were able to spend 20 because the Facebook traffic gave smart shopping more predictive indicators of intent that allowed them to go out and get more, lookalike purchasers, let's say. So ROAS, in our experience, retains, volume increases. Sometimes you can impact ROAS a little bit, but you'll just want to monitor that. This is really helpful after your smart shopping campaign plateaus. So what I recommend is don't run this out of the gate. Instead, run smart shopping alone. Get your baseline so you know what your ROAS is going to be, you know what your purchase volume is going to be. And then once you've plateaued, incorporate other traffic channels. And it doesn't just have to be Facebook. It can be anything, any other ad management channel or email marketing or whatever you have, affiliates. Driving traffic to your site that converts arms Google with information because it's tracking the user behavior of every human being on the planet, basically. And the more people that purchase, the more people that look like those people that Google can go find. Always run a brand campaign. And hopefully I've made a really good case for that, given the case studies that I just offered you. But if you're not bidding on your own brand name, you're doing yourself a disservice. Anytime you run any display, any strong display, you're going to see an uptick in brand campaigns. That's especially true for smart shopping, just because of how aggressive it is across the entire Google ecosystem. This is exactly the opposite of what Google says to do, but you have to run a dynamic product remarketing campaign. And what's interesting about it is the Google, and I'm explaining this in sort of layman's terms because, to be frank, I don't really understand it myself. I know that it works, but I don't necessarily know why. But what I think is happening is Google Smart Shopping doesn't pixel users as well as the dynamic product remarketing campaign does. So if somebody comes to the site, Google Smart Shopping has a whole lot of stuff to do. And it's not capturing all of the users that need to be remarketed the same way that the dynamic product remarketing campaign is. So you come to the site, and if you're not running a dynamic product remarketing campaign, you may or may not be captured by the Smart Shopping campaign. But if you are running a dynamic product remarketing campaign, which is not fun to say, then you are far more likely to get captured and added in this bucket. And then Google has these two campaigns, and Smart Shopping looks over at dynamic product remarketing and says, okay, we'll take all of those. So dynamic product remarketing actually never gets any clicks, but it does a really good job at capturing all of these users that it can then pass over to Smart Shopping. So even though Google says not to run it, I think it's a best practice, and it's proven to be of significant value in terms of the amount of reach that we're allowed. You have to use time decay as a conversion attribution model. This should just be true in general. I don't know why anybody would do otherwise. I mean, I know the use cases, don't angry comment me, but I think this is a best practice. And then always include lifestyle images. With Smart Shopping, because they're pushing out into the display network, when somebody's searching, product images are great, but lifestyle images are far more compelling. So make sure you have some lifestyle images that you can pull together. Here are my nevers. Never increase your budget until day 30. You'll notice Smart Shopping for the first 30 days is just super sporadic. It's up and down and all around. And you don't want to change a variable when Google's testing. You also want to scale don't scale at a rate that's faster than 10% on a daily basis. So Google says otherwise. This was actually their rule, and then they came out and said, hey, we've figured it out. You can scale faster now. It's not true. Every time we've tried it, the campaign fails almost immediately. Don't scale any faster than 10% of daily ad spend. You need to, what I think is happening there is the money that you're spending is impacting not just the ecosystem that you're in, but it's also growing that market. And so it makes everything kind of tumultuous. Don't start with a ROAS goal. Google's going to ask you for a ROAS goal. Don't give it one. If you do, here's the breadth of the entire competitive ecosystem. You're putting a ceiling on it. So add a ROAS goal 45 days later after you've been able to see what Google's able to produce from a ROAS perspective. It's not going to impact the efficacy of your campaign past you just not having as many at-bats. So people think like, oh, if I have a ROAS goal, I'll get conversions for cheaper. You won't. You just won't learn your competitive market very well. And you need to be able to do that in order to bid properly. So consider the first 45 days an investment in data, and then just let Google give you the ROAS that it's going to give you. And then from there, after 45 days, now you can say, okay, I have to be at 350% minimum. And set your ROAS as low as you can and still be profitable, because then you'll get the volume. And never pause your campaign. Google has this 2-day rule. They say it's for the health of the campaign. I actually think that it just is them training us to always run and to never pause, because it's in their best interests. Some of the risks, and the risks you will probably already know because people spend so much time bashing smart shopping. You have very little control. Bids, placements, ads, basically zero visibility. You can't break out networks. You can't exclude networks. No negative keywords. You can't choose devices. You can't make bid adjustments. You won't be able to analyze. You don't know what's working. Did my purchase come from display or shopping or YouTube or whatever? It actually breaks those out categorically, but then it gives all the credit to the cross-network attribution. So it doesn't even matter that you can see it, because the data never falls. So you have very little control, and that's a risk for obvious reasons. But the risk is worth the reward, because if you go back to my case studies, like, my goodness, when have you ever seen close to 3,000% ROAS? It's unbelievable. So if you liked this, by the way, what I really love from you is some feedback. I've got a little anonymous survey set up here, solate.com/better. Let me know how I'm doing, anything you think I'm doing right, but more importantly, anything I can improve upon, because I really want to get good at this coaching thing. And if the videos are of value to you and you're going to use them, please give me a little thumbs up. Comment if you have any questions. I answer all these personally. I read every question that people ask. Don't forget to subscribe. If you hit the little bell next to the subscription button, then you'll get notified every single time we post a video. And I'm trying to get 1,000 subscribers, because if I do that, I get to go live, which would be really exciting for me. Hopefully you do. That's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been of value, and I will see you tomorrow.